say to this president's chaos. And together, we build a future of opportunity and justice for all.
I didn't know you had elves working here.
Hope over fear.
I'm just so scared. I'm 74 years old. I worry about everything.
Aspiration over anger. The promise of America for each and every American. That is what we are fighting for today.
He's an angry elf.
This past weekend, major cities all over America played host to perhaps one of the dumbest protests in the history of America.
Stupid!
And I'll tell you why today on the show. Thanks so much for watching. My name is Reed Huberman. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Today on the show, I'm going to try to do what I do every week, which is give Christian commentary to cultural events, because we are living in an age of very bad ideas, and the only cure for bad ideas are good ideas. Today's show is sponsored by our friends over at utap2.com. If you're looking to network in the 21st century, you need to see how they can help you digitally market whatever it is that you're doing. You need to go to utap2.com, and when you check out, use the promo code IndieThinker10. Now, the No Kings protest that took place this past Saturday is something that I think deserves to be analyzed, because I think it is a great, let's just say, glimpse at the stupefaction of America. And I feel like it's only right to respond not only to the claims of this protest, but to the fact that so many people in America found it fitting to take their Saturday and waste it on perhaps what is the dumbest protest in the history of America. I really do believe that this protest is a great kind of symbol of the stupefaction of America. First and foremost, the claim that I think deserves to be analyzed, which is that Donald Trump is a king. Now, I hate to be technical here, and it might sound pedantic, but I think it's necessary to discuss, because very few people seem to understand that a king is somebody who has a monarchic rule for his whole life, and also dynastic rule. His kids after him will rule in his place. Seeing that Donald Trump has neither of those things, it seems that we should remind people that the claim that we don't need kings in America is utterly banal and ridiculous. Besides, Americans live in perhaps the greatest experiment ever in human history. They are very blessed to live in the country they live in, and they have very little to complain about, which is perhaps why this protest even exists. A bunch of bored people who are truly prosperous have allowed their prosperity to finally rot their brains to the point of not understanding what it actually means to live in a free society and to know what kind of progress we've actually gained. Maybe they know so little about history that they can't appreciate where we've come from. Now, I am not suggesting that we shouldn't ever protest, or that we shouldn't ever lift our voice, or that things can't be better in America. I'm just simply saying that if you think you have a monarch in America,
you are really dumb.
And to put this on full display, please allow me to show you a clip of one such protester telling the world why she has taken to the streets on June 14th.
The answer is really obvious. These are my countrymen. This is my country. And my entire life I was told that I have the right to protest, that I have a right to care. And I do care. And not only do I have a right, it's my duty. It's my duty to care about what's going on. It's my duty to stand up. People have been talking about injustice since this country was built. This country was built on injustices. We killed Native Americans, then we built it off the backs of slaves. And they want to talk about how reparations, and that's just, it happened 100 years ago and we shouldn't talk about it. We see the effects today. America was built on bigotry. America was built on hate. And it doesn't have to be that way. I do not live in a country, I do not pay tax dollars to murder innocent people. These are people. This is a country for us. This is a country of my parents and my children and my neighbors. And this is a country of immigrants. The colonials did not pay thousands of dollars. They did not wait 8 years to have citizenship. They didn't do that. I am not going to sit here while my people suffer.
What? I mean, honestly, this girl cannot make up her mind what she's actually protesting. So she's protesting Native Americans, she's protesting for reparations, and she's also protesting because her tax dollars don't go to kill innocent people. Well, I humbly suggest, young lady, that you should defund Planned Parenthood if you're really serious about that third thing. I think this just goes to show that the vast majority of these people had no idea what they were actually protesting. And if anything, they desperately need a cure for listening to the mainstream media. So let's dig into the claim that Donald Trump is a monarch in the first place. Now, a lot of people have claimed that Donald Trump said he's going to run for a third term, and he's not allowed to do that by the Constitution, and he's going to try to rule forever. Donald Trump was joking, and you people desperately need a sense of humor, and you desperately need to chill out. Now, the second thing is that people were claiming that June 14th was a day that Donald Trump was throwing a birthday party for himself and using tax dollars to do it. June 14th is the anniversary of the Army, and Donald Trump was simply trying to honor our armed forces. It just coincidentally fell on his birthday. And third, and most importantly, because this is the one that's fresh on everybody's mind, is that Donald Trump sent in the National Guard to LA. There's a lot of misunderstanding of what Donald Trump actually did there. So first of all, Donald Trump sent in the National Guard to protect one federal building. That is all. Not to lock down the streets and patrol the streets of LA and to make sure that martial law is being instituted because he wanted to take over LA for some reason. Donald Trump was just simply trying to take care of a federal building and sent troops there to do that. And it was a very limited detachment of National Guard soldiers to do it in the first place. Now, I also have to tell you that 12 other presidents before Donald Trump also called in the National Guard to calm down civil unrest. And some of those names, you might know them. They're kind of familiar. Some of the people who did that were President George Washington, Abraham Lincoln, and John Adams. So in other words, these men who were the founding fathers of our nation, they're the ones who used the National Guard to try to quell uprisings and unrest in our city streets. Now, this also goes to a kind of fourth thing. Donald Trump, he defies the norms of democracy. He is the one who's trying to erode constitutional rights. Listen.
Listen, Linda. Listen.
All I have to tell you is this. I do not want to hear about norms from the people who want to redefine human biology, who want to redefine marriage, who want to tell you that the thing hanging between your legs isn't actually what you think it is, it's just a social construct, and the ones who also want to redefine what a baby in the womb is. You guys have no ground to stand on in terms of redefining the norms. But maybe more importantly, the presence of these protests actually just point to something that is far more glaring and far more important than purely the stupefaction of America. And this is where I want to suggest the second thing, and probably the most important thing, because I don't think these protests are about Donald Trump being a king. I don't think these people really even know what they're protesting in the first place, except for what the mainstream media has told them over and over again. I actually think protests in the present are about something much deeper and perhaps more important. Now, we are told that protesting is a hallmark of democracy, that it's the way we speak truth to power, and that it's why we have the First Amendment, right? It's the sigh of the oppressed, and by protesting, we will actually enact a change. But I really have a question about this. Even though we're told this about protesting, can you point to a protest in recent memory that actually made a significant difference? Now, I want to push aside the civil rights movement protests for a moment because I'll get back to them here. But in recent memory, point to a protest that has actually made a difference. And I'm going to suggest that you probably will not be able to point to a single thing. And I am going to tell you the reason for that now. And the reason for that is because protesting is lazy and easy, and it is almost always narcissistic and self-centered rather than it is about something that makes a difference. It's about you feeling better about yourself. It's about virtue signaling more so than actually truly changing our world to make it a better place, because I think we all know that protesting is super easy. You go out, yell for a couple of hours, hold a sign, and then, God forbid, maybe burn some things. But that doesn't actually really make a big difference in society. In fact, it is actually crumbling our society more and more because protesting actually requires very little of you. It doesn't move the needle because changing things actually requires that you do something, that you build something, that you do something nice for somebody else, that you sacrifice something, and protesting isn't any of those things. That's why it solves very little. I'll just put it this way. If protesting truly enacts change in the world, it is perhaps the least productive means by which we can make change in the world. So I want to bring back the civil rights movement. Now, the reason the civil rights movement was actually impactful is because it was not just protesting, but it was protesting for a just cause. And that's what we really find in the present that we lack. See, we can protest all day long about anything that we want to protest, but it's important to attach our protest to actually something that matters, something that has deep meaning. If protests are ever going to really make a difference, they must be combined with a moral truth that requires moral courage. And we find that the vast majority of our protests today actually don't combine any of those things. And that could be because we're becoming a less religious and less philosophically based society. The more we move away from Christianity, the less we have to actually stand for. And we are desperate for meaning. So I want to prove this with a quick illustration. Now, this is the protest that took place in Chattanooga where I live. And I want you to scan the crowd with me real quick, and I want you to see if you notice something about those who are in attendance for this No Kings protest here. And I wonder if you see the same thing I did, which is that the vast majority of the people gathered in my city are really, really old, because boomer love them some protests. You know why? Because they are desperate for meaning. They need to know that their lives as they get older actually matter, that they enacted change, and as they get older, they slowly but surely start to feel irrelevant. Therefore, these protests, especially by white liberals, are usually attended by very old people. That's because there's a universal human desire in each and every one of us. Every single person, unless there's some kind of mental defect in the individual, they come into this world with a desire to make a difference. There's nobody that comes into the world and says to themselves, I really hope to live a mediocre existence. The universal human desire is that we all need to know that our lives have been meaningful. But as I suggested before, the one place where Americans especially, as a society, found meaning was in religious community, in religious truth, in pursuing the highest good. That's where in the past we have so much found a lot of our meaning. And that's when our protests actually mattered more, when we were more rooted in a Christian basis. And that goes back to the civil rights movement. Because I don't know if you know what that R-E-V in front of Martin Luther King Jr.'s name means, but it means reverend. Now, he may not have always practiced like he was a reverend, but he appealed to the Christian conscience of Americans when he was appealing for civil rights. And that's because you need a higher transcendent set of values to believe in if you're actually going to stand for something that really matters. But again, we find less and less of that the less Christian we become. Viktor Frankl, the author of Man's Search for Meaning, wrote this. He said, when we are no longer able to change a situation, we are challenged to change ourselves. What Viktor Frankl is referring to here is the idea that in a concentration camp, as he was, that you really can't change society, but you can do something else, something very liberating. You can change yourself. Now, I want to suggest something crazy to you. We don't live in a concentration camp in modern America. And Donald Trump, regardless of what progressivism libs tell you, is not Hitler. Therefore, we have the freedom to change society. But because of, I would argue, Christian principles and values that have shaped the West, we actually live in a pretty just society that is pretty prosperous. In fact, the most just and prosperous society in the history of the world. That's not to say that we can't improve. It's just to say that perhaps there are bigger issues than the government and Donald Trump impacting your life. And it might be the man in the mirror who is impacting your life more than anything else. But because most people find it easier to point the finger at others rather than to point the finger back at themselves, they want to search through the dumpster bin of our society and find some cause to glom onto. And that's where these No King protests really come from. It comes from the death of God and man's search for meaning. But I've got good news. God doesn't really die. And I don't know if you paid attention, but Jesus kind of hard to kill because he has the habit of resurrecting. So the one true king of society that we should be worshiping is the one that when we finally fix our gaze upon him, he will help us find something of meaning in this life. He will help us truly scratch the itch down deep inside of the soul of each and every one of us, what our heart actually yearns for. And he will help us also find the strength to realize that perhaps in our society today, the biggest issue is actually ourselves. And he can help us change because he's the one who made us. All right, thanks so much for watching. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And if the show is beneficial to you, you will love becoming a member over at indythinker.org/support. For a small monthly fee, you can gain access to exclusive perks like ebooks, audiobooks, movies, documentaries, and so much more that will help you take your Christian worldview to the next level. Don't forget to check out the sponsors down below in this podcast, but most importantly, go with God.